Yeah, it says it's live now.
Thank you, Anna. And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the virtual meeting of the Education Advisory Board. I'm Councillor Susie Horton, and I will be chairing the meeting today. Members of the public are invited to view this meeting, and if anyone is watching, then welcome too. Those present are requested to keep their microphones on mute and to only turn them on when they are called to speak. This will limit the amount of background noise. Members are requested to keep their cameras turned on at all times. Officers and presenters are requested to turn their cameras on only when they're presenting their reports or answering questions. Members and those who wish to speak should use the chat to write their name, followed by RTS, which is the system we've been using in this meeting. Please do not use the chat for anything else. It says here, please use the chat on the right side of the screen, not the chat icon on the left. I don't know whether I've got one on the left, but anyway, use the one on the right of the screen. And each time you speak, please say who you are, so it's clear who's speaking, and I will do my best to keep an eye on the chat. If there are technical difficulties, we'll endeavour to resolve these and where necessary have a brief adjournment, but the meeting can proceed where it's correct. Before I ask who's present, I'd like to introduce Sally Hodges, who is the Interim Director of Children, Families and Education. I think she's been here 3 weeks so far. So welcome, Sally.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to be here.
Thank you. So please can I ask everyone taking part today to confirm they're present. What I think I'll do is I'll do a roll call and then you can just say that you're present. So rather than everyone going through introducing themselves. So, and I'll go from my list first. So first on my list is Councillor Ryan Brent. Councillor Terry Norton.
Yes, present, Susie. Thank you.
Welcome. Councillor Jeanette Smith.
Present, and welcome to Sally on board.
Thanks, Jeanette. Councillor Judith Smythe. And then welcome to Sally. We know she's here because she's just spoken. Mike Stoneman.
Yep, present. Hello.
Hi, Mike. Debbie Anderson, Head of School Improvement.
Yes, present. Good afternoon.
So Mike, I didn't say your title, Deputy Director of Children, Families and Education. Better get that in there.
Thanks, Susie.
Sarah Christopher, who's the Portsmouth Education Partnership and School Inclusion Manager.
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Welcome, Sarah. Alison Critchley, Head of Sufficiency and Resources.
Can I just give her apologies? I've agreed to cover her item today. She's tied up in something else, so yeah, I'm covering for her in terms of that second paper.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And Anna Martin.
Present.
And
Democratic Services.
Yes, Democratic Services. And I've just seen that Robert Sanders has joined us too, so welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, apologies for my slightly late arrival.
No worries.
And also, Susie, could we welcome Francis, the independent chair? Yeah.
Hi, Francis. We did welcome. You were here last time, weren't you, Francis? Did you come last time?
Yes.
I think you were.
I did come last time.
Okay. Well, welcome again. Thanks very much for coming to this as well. Have I missed anyone out? I don't think so. Just scanning. Okay, welcome all. So we'll go on to the agenda. So the first item of the agenda is apologies for absence. So we've obviously received apologies via Mike for Alison Critchley. Anyone? I haven't received any apologies. Anna, have you received any apologies?
I'm not aware of any others, no.
Does anyone else here know if anyone's not coming? Okay. Okay, we'll push on then. So the second item, which is always lovely and lengthy with us lot, is the declarations of interest. So I'll kick off with my usual one, which is that I'm Vice Chair of Governors at Craneswater Junior School. I'm going to go to Councillor Jeanette Smith next.
I have two now. My normal one, which is I work for Hampshire branch Unison full time. And my second one is I am a governor of City of Portsmouth College, the newly formed college with Highbury and Portsmouth College.
Oh, that's great news.
I'm very proud to be one.
Yes. Councillor Norton?
Thank you. I am employed at Mayfield School, albeit through an external agency.
Thank you. Anyone else got any declarations of interest? Mike, have you got them?
Yeah, I'm a governor at City of Portsmouth College, like Jeanette. So yeah, that's me. I think that's the only other one I can think of at the moment. Yeah.
Anyone else? Debbie, did you put your hand up?
Yes.
Yeah.
As last time, I sometimes work for Ofsted as an Ofsted inspector.
Okay. Anyone else? Last chance. Okay, that's great. So that's item 2 done.
I think you got Francis putting a hand up.
Oh, sorry, Francis. I didn't see
It's
that.
okay. I'm director of 2 education charities, so Quorum Life Education and Future Frontiers.
Thank you, Francis. Aren't we all very busy outside of this meeting? That's great. Okay, so now I'll move on to item 3, which is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 14th of July, 2021. I think most of us were at that meeting. I've read the minutes. There aren't any direct actions that don't apply to stuff that's coming up today. So I'm happy to say that sign them off as an accurate record. Can someone second? Yeah, I can see Jeanette nodding.
Yeah, I can second. Yeah. No.
Okay, so that's good. So they're all approved. Thank you very much. And we'll go on to item 4, which is support and challenge for the local authority maintained schools. And is Debbie going to present this?
Yes, I will do for
I thought
you.
so. It says on my notes that Mike is, but I'm assuming while you're here that you will present
Not
it.
me, no, Debbie.
Yes, no, that's fine. So this report builds on previous reports that we've had that I've delivered about our LA maintained schools. Previously, we talked about how they were prioritised, and that still stands. Taking into consideration previous Ofsted inspection judgments, we can look at standards, but obviously they're 2 years out of date, but sort of trends and history in those, changes in school leadership and our ongoing intelligence of how we work with those schools. So as I say, this builds on the reports that you have had previously, and I've been particularly mindful that last time that you said you'd like some more data, some more sort of forensic analysis. So I have included those in the appendices when we get to those. So obviously a key focus of our work is about support and challenge for our schools, and quite rightly we start with our 2 schools that had less than good judgments for overall effectiveness by Ofsted. So I've outlined those. Since the 1st of April 2021, Corpus Christi Catholic Primary School has become an academy and joined the Edith Stein Catholic Academy Trust, so therefore they cease to be LA maintained. But what I have built into the report is the work that I did particularly with them prior to that conversion, and then from there is a sort of ongoing relationship, but obviously it's different because they are no longer LA maintained. But at the point of conversion, they were certainly moving in the right direction, and that was recognised in the Ofsted inspection monitoring visit in January. And it also talked about how the LA had supported the school and the improvements that they were making. Our other LA maintained school that has that judgment that is less than good is Milton Park Primary School. And particularly through the pandemic, HMI and Ofsted were conducting, for Milton Park, termly monitoring visits. So I've included in there the reference that in their last monitoring visit in June 2021, the HMI found that leaders and those responsible for governance are taking effective action in order for the school to become a good school. Their conversion date to become an academy is now the 1st of December 2021. So at the moment they remain an LA maintained school and I'm working with them. But obviously that conversion date will change that relationship. Also built on the sort of successful school-to-school support that we secured, particularly for those two, for Corpus Christi and for Mainfield, and have included Milton Park. So we managed to secure national leader of education work to support those schools, which was particularly through the pandemic. So that was brokering of 5 days support. Moving on, I know we're all very concerned about literacy and standards in literacy. So I've written and reported to you about the twinning bid. We have been twinned with Hastings Opportunity Area. They receive significant funding, but to receive their funding, they have to do some twinning. And we were asked if we would twin with them. We put in a bid. And we were enabled last year for 10 schools to take part in a reading programme that is designed and run by Hackney Learning Trust called Destination Reader. And I'd refer you to the detailed appendix. I had to write a report about Easter time. The schools started the training January, so Easter time was a mid-year report. And then there was a report at the end of July to secure the end part of that funding. So I hope you'll be able to see it. It was really positive. I mean, obviously through COVID and lots of things have happened. The programme was quite flexible. Schools could choose if they rolled it out to one class, a year group, and then later on to the rest of the school. And I have actually visited a couple of schools that have been employing Destination Reader, and it seems to be really promising. And also building on that, we have been able to extend it. I have put in a second bid for a second year of the project, and we have 8 further schools, Key Stage 2, that are taking on Destination Reader. 2 schools with their Year 7s are trialling a new Destination Reader Plus programme, which actually Hackney have actually devising with our Portsmouth schools. So that's completely new to build on that reading in Portsmouth. And 1 further school is taking on another reading programme, which is particularly for Key Stage 1 as well. So the bid that I secured, which I've just recently had confirmation of, has secured those further schools to become part of that second cohort with that programme. Obviously, phonics is really important. We had our particular grilling from our meeting with Nick Gibb last year. But saying that, we do have a local English hub, Spring Hill Catholic Primary School in Southampton. And it's those English hubs and the hubs that tend to hold a lot of the funding from DFE. And not all of our schools who were eligible had accessed that funding. So I've been able to secure some schools accessing funding to purchase further resources and programmes that they need to particularly improve their phonics work. Phonics is really important. The Early Language and Literacy Development Group of the PEP, we've got a work stream on phonics, and we are working on developing phonics not only at Key Stage 1 but up into Key Stage 2 and 3 and 4, because as I've said, all teachers of are teachers of reading, whether it's secondary and they're a subject specialist, or whether it's down in primary or Key Stage 1. So you might hear the term SSPs, Systematic Synthetic Phonics Programmes. There will be in March 2022 some particular programmes, these SSPs, that are validated by the DFE. So some schools are waiting to see what the validated list are. Others are moving and adopting SSPs now, but they are particularly structured, and all the resources and all the teaching materials match at the particular point in time the phonics that the children are being taught. So the work that I've done with schools is to make sure that they're aware that that's becoming a requirement and how they move towards that. If they choose not to adopt an SSP and to follow their own programme, everything has to match, and it has to be really, really a robust process to get the results, to ensure that those children are developing those phonics skills to improve their reading. You will understand that for moderation, that's not now mandatory for our early years foundation stage profile, but we've continued to offer that in a way so that our schools can check out those judgments, and that's been organised by our early years team, and schools have taken that up. Obviously, leadership is important, so I continue to support particularly some of our recruitment processes. And just recently this term, I was part of the advisory sort of part of a recruitment panel to recruit a permanent head teacher for one of our LA maintained schools, Cottage Grove Primary, even though they are going to convert and become an academy on the 1st of December. So I was there in an advisory capacity, as well as somebody from the Academy Trust that is going, and their Board of Governors. So it is important to support those head teachers, and there is a specific coaching group that has continued to support some of our newer to headship head teachers. And as you can see from the quote, I think it's been really tough for experienced head teachers going through the pandemic, let alone if you're new to headship. So I think they have valued that support, both virtual and by visits to their schools. I've put a little bit about HISP. So Teaching School Alliances have gone, but we're now in the world of Teaching School Hubs. And also you won't hear the term NQTs, newly qualified teachers have gone. We're now in the world of ECTs, early career teachers, who have training and development with the early career framework for 2 years now, and some release time, and their mentors are with that. But HISP are running that programme, and most of our schools, I believe, have signed up to that. Peer review, part of the education strategy. So I'm currently involved in two sort of strands of peer review. We now have a peer review process for our LA maintained schools, which all of them, apart from the 2 that are converting in the next couple of months, have signed up to. The teams have been organised, the schedules and dates have been organised, and some training has been delivered. So there are about 3, I think, happening before Christmas, a lot of those peer reviews happening in the spring term, and a couple in the summer term as well. And then we also have the peer review process that has been written for the Portsmouth Education Partnership. And at the moment, we're developing the training for that with a trial group. And that trial group of 3 schools includes an LA maintained school, schools that are part of ARC, Multi-Academy Trust, and also a school that is part of University of Chichester Multi-Academy Trust. So you can see how we're working together on that. So we've done an initial training video, and then we've delivered some face-to-face training for the next part of the process. And in light of the feedback, we've slightly amended that. And then what we're looking to do is for that trial group to go ahead, trial the actual process before we put it out across the whole Portsmouth Education Partnership. I've also included the information about Pompey Pirates, who are definitely looking to expand on the back of their success so far. And that's particularly for the most vulnerable and disadvantaged children. Obviously, that's not just our local authority, LA maintained schools, but all schools, but certainly putting the director of the hub in touch with the most vulnerable children and disadvantaged. But it appears to be very successful, and it looks like that second hub will be opening in January 2022 in the Dockyard, which is fantastic. And that will be another 100 places offered to children. So it started with 60, went to 90. At the moment there's 100, but there will be another 100 children that will be offered places with that. And then to support our LA maintained schools, particularly now that inspection is well underway again, whether we agree with it or not. Over the summer holidays, I wrote some training modules, and I've been working with some of our LA maintained schools, particularly understanding the process, but also understanding the Ofsted early reading deep dive, because reading tends to be, that happens in every primary inspection. And then everything else sort of tends to lead from there. And we know if children can read, they can access the rest of the curriculum. So lots been going on, particularly for our LA maintained schools that we meet with very regularly. And I think they really welcome both the challenge and the support that they've had over this last period of time. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Quite a range of stuff that's been going on, so, and also building on a lot of the stuff that was in the previous report as well. Mike, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just a couple of things I wanted to add to what Debbie has said, one point which I think was reflected in Debbie's presentation is the fact that although this report was about our LA maintained schools and the challenge and support we provide them, of course a lot of the work that Debbie does is citywide, and that reflects the work we do as part of the Portsmouth Education Partnership. So you've heard about Destination Reader, Phonics, Pompey Pirates, peer review. Of course, many of these programs, academies are involved as well, because it makes sense to, because obviously these are Portsmouth priorities, and we work really closely with academies. So just that was just one point I wanted to make, and just another one which is very recent. We've agreed as part of this education senior leadership team that we will do kind of informal visits to all our LA maintained schools each term, split between the 4 members of the SLT. So that's myself, Debbie, Alison, and Liz. So we'll be doing those termly visits, and that's just to keep in touch, make sure that our maintained schools are okay. Any issues that are springing up, we can address those, and just make sure that they're getting the support they need, on top of obviously the challenge and support that Debbie puts in around school improvement. So just wanted to alert you to that as well.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Terry.
Thank you. 3 questions from me, if that's okay. The first is around Corpus Christi, and do we have any early indication that the academy chain that are taking over have some good strategies that will work well with Portsmouth students? I know that often academy chains come in, they have what they think is a teaching model or a model for success, and it doesn't quite work with Portsmouth schools. What early signs do we have that they're going to have some effective things in place for a quick turnaround at Corpus Christi?
Okay, well, the trust that Corpus Christi are with, there is only one other school in that trust. It's a local, just over the hill, Catholic secondary school. So it's an outstanding school, and part of the reason going was to add that bit of primary practice to the secondary practice. So we don't have a lot of intelligence around that now. But it was partly that they were on the right track, and it was really having an outstanding leadership part to support them in that sense. But certainly the NLE work that we put in there as well was from another Catholic primary outstanding head teacher of an outstanding school.
So will we continue to work closely with them so that they understand, Portsmouth's background and what have you? I know sometimes, for example, Bo Hunt come in and take over a school in inner city Portsmouth. It doesn't always fit the mold. So will we carry on working with them so that there are some, so they're very clear on what they're inheriting? Over the hill sounds quite different in terms of demographic.
It could be slightly different. We do have our sort of annual conversation with each of the trusts. So Mike and I and some of the senior officers, we would have that annual conversation, and that builds in some support and challenge, and they would be able to update us. And then obviously things that we're doing across the Portsmouth Education Partnership, academies are part of that. So Corpus Christi they are using Destination Reader, so they're part of that network as well. So we keep in touch with them on the projects that they're doing.
Great, thank you. The next is one that carries over from the previous meeting. Actually, it's around CAMS and the waiting lists that are there. It does mention in the previous minutes about the waiting times there and the problems with filling staff vacancies. Do we have an update on that? Are we in a better position now?
That's not really my department. I don't know if Sarah Christopher could probably answer that one more.
I was going to go to Sarah. Sarah, do you want to, as Terry's asked it now, do you mind coming in on that?
Sure. It's a similar picture nationally and a similar picture locally. What we have been able to do is we have it's out for consultation at the moment. We have a draft pathway to clarify actually the whole raft of support that is available for wellbeing and mental health, such that obviously there are still children and young people that are waiting for CAMS a much longer time than they would want to be, or that we would want them to be waiting. But there's also a lot of other supports, and quite often people think they want CAMS and actually there is other support available. So what we're trying to do is make sure that the people who can get the right support, so for example from from mental health support teams or from Couth, or there's various other online programs that are available that are quality assured and professionally backed, that those people have access to that support to reduce some of that pressure on CAMS. So we have still got that investment in CAMS. There is still some challenge in recruiting, but it is being addressed as a priority, but it's not where we would want it to be yet, no.
Thank you, and forgive me, Debbie. I've got my reports mixed up there. Last one, I'm sure it will be for you. It's about assemblies and things like that. Do we have any? Are schools back to face-to-face assemblies? Can we guarantee that students are getting that, the valuable training they need in assemblies and that kind of information? Or
I think that's very much up to the school, and obviously, particularly in the last half term, everybody initially sort of went back to it. Particularly, some schools were more year groups rather than getting, but it depended on levels of cases and infections. So I think they would be doing assemblies, whether sometimes they're partly children in the room and some accessing it virtually as well. So I think it really depends on the sort of health situation of the schools at the moment. But I know schools value that for all sorts of different reasons.
I know that many schools have mentioned, the inconsistencies around the internet. For instance, the internet goes down, that assembly doesn't get delivered. Where do you find time to deliver that later on? I just don't want a situation where handfuls of children are getting, that valuable information, that training, and others aren't, because of the unreliability of technology and things. But thank you. It sounds like it's not a big issue.
Thank you, Terry. I'm going to go to Jeanette next. Can I just remind people to put RTS in the chat, because I'm going to lose control over the order. I think it went Jeanette, Mike, and Robert. But just moving forward, if people could do that. Thank you. Jeanette.
My question was on the report, and it's about the forgive me because the report's on the other screen, so that's why I'm looking away. It's about the key performance indicators and the outcomes, and I don't want to sound negative, but I've been around these sort of meetings a long time, and I'm a little bit worried that you're unable to report because there's no statutory Key Stage 2 SATs. So how are we going to measure in-house, and what does success look like? Apart from the obvious that a child can read, what is how do we progress this, that we actually implement these provisions, which sound really good, fantastic ones, but what's the success criteria, and what happens if it's not working?
Well, it's the same for every school in every local authority at the moment. It's not unique to Portsmouth that we don't have those national standardised testing arrangements. All schools will be assessing, tracking, monitoring the progress of their children. What we don't have is the standardised measure by which to benchmark one school against another, and a national picture and a national average. We just don't have that. So what we have to be concentrating on at the moment is the best quality teaching, learning, tracking, catch-up programs that we can. So programs like Destination Reader, which isn't a scheme, it's about good quality pedagogy. The teaching of reading is a really good program to particularly be using at this time. Getting our phonics right in this robust way and using something like an SSP is what we can do at the moment. And time will go quickly, and it won't be long before we do have those tests, and those measures will be at the end of this academic year.
So will we know early if there are problems in certain schools with either implementing this process or it's not working as it should be? Will that be highlighted early?
Well, I think schools won't have anything to compare it against, because they're not, unless they're part of something where they're looking at, if there's something. There's an organisation called Pixel, which puts schools in a family group of other schools if they buy into that. If they do that and put their data into it of where they are and tracking their children, they would have a benchmark against other schools. If they don't, then it's about tracking those individually, and we won't know until those tests come out, because because we're not required to, and actually we're told that we can't use anything prior for accountability at the moment.
That's helpful. Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
Can I be cheeky and jump in because it follows what Jeanette was saying? We'll be doing our moderation exercises, Debbie.
Yes.
So we will get to a point where we will be looking at internal to Portsmouth, looking at comparative, outcomes.
And Sarah Hilditch, our lead assessment and moderation, she's already done training for teachers who are new to year 2, new to year 6. She's done the testing for, and is appointing moderators already. So that whole programme will be happening, yes, to make sure the judgments are accurate and secure of where they are. What we can't do is benchmark it across each other before we get to that point.
Yeah. That's what I thought. Thank you for letting me jump in. Mike, I think you're next.
Yeah, sorry, and I'll use RTS next time. Apologies. It was actually just going back to Councillor Norton's point about Corpus Christi and the Academy Trust that Corpus Christi have joined. Just to reinforce what Debbie has said, we'll have the annual meeting with all our MATs, including what's called the Edith Stein Trust, which Oakland's Academy is the lead school for. So we'll have that this term. And also worth just reinforcing that quite a lot of the pupils in our Catholic schools, whether it's St Swithin, St Paul's, Corpus Christi or St John's, go to Oakland's in year 7. Quite a lot now go to St Edmunds, which is is a positive thing. That obviously acknowledges the fantastic progress St Edmunds have made, but still quite large numbers go to Oakland. So we're very much in touch with them, and we'll be checking on progress later this year.
Thanks, Mike. Robert.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of questions, if I may. One, you mentioned, Debbie, NQTs are now ECTs, and that lasts for 2 years rather than an NQT, which was a year. Are there any cost implications for that for schools in terms of release time and so on, covering outside of the classroom and so on?
Yeah, schools are actually funded to be able to do that with their mentors. So mentors have some release time and the ECTs have some release time, and then they have time together. But schools are funded for that because it's over the 2 years now.
Yeah, great. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And then you mentioned, Mike, actually, you came in and mentioned about termly meetings with trusts and so on. Is it still the policy that you're encouraging schools to join academy trusts? And also, do you have positive relationships with all the trusts, or are there some trusts that you find it harder to communicate with than others? Is the general picture positive?
Yeah.
One?
Okay. In fact, if you go on mute, Robert, because I'm getting some echo, that might help. Yeah. Okay. So in answer to your last question, yes, we by and large we have good relationships with our multi-academy trusts. 13 at the moment. It'll be 14 when the University of Portsmouth Academy Trust is set up and takes on 2 of our maintained schools. The only trust where I'd say it's perhaps not so good is some of our larger national chains, where, not surprisingly, communications are a little bit more complex because they've got a sort of a larger hierarchy. So United Learning Trust, for example, which looks after 3 of our schools in the north, and ARC schools, which have 3 of our schools in the south, the communications with them is not as strong as they are with some of our local and regional trusts. But having said that, ARC in particular, the relationship has really strengthened over the last few years. So I think we're in a much better place. I think probably the only trust now I would say we could do with a slightly better communication is United Learning Trust, and we're meeting the new regional director this term, so I'm hoping we can improve that. But that's a strong relationship. Your first question, sorry, just remind me, what was that, Robert? I've forgotten already.
It was just about whether you had still a policy of encouraging schools to become join multi-academy trusts or not.
Yeah, the policy hasn't really changed. So we still say to schools that we would like them to consider joining strong academy trusts who have a proven track record. but we don't particularly push it anymore, to be honest, Robert. The schools that are left have made it pretty clear that they wish to remain as LA maintains schools. It is their choice. It's the choice of the governing board. That choice is only taken away from them if they get themselves into a category of inadequate or special measures from Ofsted. Otherwise, and in those situations, they are forced to become a trust through the RSC. But no, we leave it to the governing board to decide what's best for the school. But what we would say, if they are considering joining a trust, then look at those strong academy trusts that already exist within the city. We would encourage them to look at those first. Yeah. Okay,
thank you. And just to echo actually your comments, one of our schools being an ARC school charter academy, their communication engagement with the diocese has improved recently as well in terms of so that kind of mirrors your experience. It might be helpful to know. Thank you.
I can't see any other questions. Just before. Oh, sorry, Judith. Beg your pardon. I've just seen it, and then Francis as well. Sorry, Judith.
In past years, recruitment of teachers and new teachers and experienced teachers has been a problem in Portsmouth. I haven't recently heard any comments on that, but I just wondered if it was possible to give a general comment on whether or not Portsmouth schools, regardless of the sector they're in, are having difficulties recruiting good staff, and whether we'll be able to retain them better than we used to be, and whether there's any kind of problem for us in comparison to other areas as they used to be.
Do you want to answer this, Debbie, or is that more relating to the next report? Fine. You can go on to this one. Okay.
I think the Teach Portsmouth campaign website and everything that's done and giving that a really high profile has been really, really good for encouraging people into the profession, for encouraging sometimes TAs, teaching assistants who want to progress their careers. So I think there is a basis out there. I think the pandemic has made things more difficult, and I think teachers are tired, and it has been a difficult time. My concern would actually be more around school leadership, because I think when that's advertised, you get far less numbers and people applying to be school leaders than you did previously.
Good point.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Judith. I'm sorry I didn't see that. Francis.
Yeah, mine was really just a response to add to what Mike said and Robert about the relationship with the MATs. Part of the thing that I'm trying to sort of support through the PEP is to meet with all the MAT leaders as I do. So I've started meeting the leaders of the boards feeding through, but some of that are the MAT leaders. And this half term, my focus is to make sure that I've spoken to them all so that we get a much more inclusive feel, and that they feel that they can contribute as much as any other Portsmouth school. So hopefully that will build the relationship, and certainly ARC have responded, so that looks good.
Thank you, Francis. Mike?
Yeah, just want to come back in on the recruitment retention issue. So I agree with what obviously Debbie said, and I completely agree about leadership and some of the issues we've had there. Just to say that, the Teach Portsmouth campaign continues, so we're still focusing on teacher recruitment retention. Absolutely, we're not going to take our foot off that pedal. But the other issue we've found, and we're getting more and more feedback from head teachers around support staff, particularly teacher assistants, and the difficulties schools are finding to recruit those kind of staff in the face of a more attractive wages and more flexible hours in other industries, notably, for example, in supermarkets. We're up against that kind of competition, and that particularly affects our special schools. So, we've had some difficult conversations with Mary Rose Academy recently, who are really struggling for those staff. So, yeah, that's that, and because of that, we're doing some additional work around Teach Portsmouth to address that particular sector as well. So, work in hand there.
Thank you, Mike. That's great. Range of issues there. Just before we move on, I just wanted to say, it's really interesting in this meeting that, and I think it reflects the close working relationships of the MAT with the local authority, that we frequently stray into talking about things as a whole, where actually, in theory, this meeting is for local authority maintained schools as a focus. But I don't see that as an entirely bad thing, because in actual fact, the relationships are really, really close. And I think that PEP has done a really good job on that. But I do think we always need to be mindful of the autonomy that schools have when they become academies, and the role the local authority plays. And we obviously do invest in that, because we invest beyond just the local authority schools. But it is interesting how, and I think it's not the same throughout the country, that people talk about Portsmouth schools so holistically, and that's a credit to a lot of the positive work that's gone on, particularly around the PEP. Anyway, so this item was around noting the report, so I'm assuming everyone's going to note it, and we will move on to the next report, which is the ongoing response to COVID-19. And are you going to present this, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay, I shall hand over to you then.
Okay, so yeah, I'm covering this for Alison, and in many ways it's quite a short report, even though the report is fairly long, and the reason for that is it builds on previous reports that we've presented to this board in October 2020, February 21, and more recently in July 21, and kind of provides an historical account of all the support that has been provided in response to COVID. So the sections I'm going to focus on in this report are sections 9 and 10, which basically cover what we've done since we last reported to the board. So if we just move to those sections, I mean, I'm happy to take questions, by the way, on the rest of the report and all the work we've been doing. But as I say, this is just picking up on sections 9 and 10. So section 9 of this report covers what we did over the summer holidays, which may seem a long time ago now, but two key things we did over the summer was the obviously the food vouchers for free school meal pupils using the COVID grant fund that we had, and that was made available to all children of statutory school age, including year 11 leavers, and we did that through the Eden Red scheme, as we've been doing in previous holiday periods. The other substantial programme, though, that we offered over the summer holiday period was the what was known as the HAF Fun Pompey programme, which provide a range of activities and provisions for children and families over the summer, and we've got a breakdown there of the sort of activities that were provided and the numbers involved. So over 3,000 children took part in those activities. There is some duplication, so some children would have attended more than one provider, so there is some overlap. So I can't give you an actual exact figure of the number of children, but certainly there were 3,123 children taking part in the activities that we provided. And we should have provided it perhaps, there's a really good link now available to a video on YouTube which shows some of those activities that took place. So, really good feedback. And we are preparing for a similar type of programme over the winter holiday period. So that was done over the summer. In the autumn term, obviously, we've come back to a very different set of circumstances with the removal of those restrictions in terms of how schools should operate from the beginning of the academic year. And the main changes, I'm sure you're aware, was removing the necessity of keeping groups of pupils in separate bubbles. There was also changes in terms of the requirement for close contact of people with confirmed cases of coronavirus to self-isolate. That was removed, so children and young people could stay in the school. And then also we removed the duty on schools to routinely do the contact tracing. So a lot was removed, and schools were encouraged to effectively move back to a kind of new normal. Having said that, and we've set this out in the report, we saw over the course of this term infection rates climb very steeply, particularly in primary age and secondary age children. And in fact, it wasn't so long ago that in Portsmouth we had the highest infection rates in the southeast, and in fact the 10th highest nationally. That has come down. We're in a slightly better place now, but amongst primary age children and secondary age children, the last set of figures we had were showing still very high rates. They've come down slightly over half term, but they are still high. And I think was particularly concerning towards the end of the first half of this term was the pressure this was now exerting on our schools. We're not just seeing pupils absent because of coronavirus, but it's the staff absence that is now really putting pressure on schools. So there were a number of schools a week before half term that had to partially close. There was one school which effectively closed in the last 2 days. That was at Admiral Lord Nelson School, and moved to remote learning. And we are watching that closely this term. I've not had any schools yet report any difficulties, but we know that may reoccur with the high rates of reinfection. One of the things we've done to support schools is that a letter went out from Helen Atkinson at the start of term, effectively saying to schools that if there is clear evidence of outbreaks within your schools, then the Director of Public Health gave permission for those schools to bring back measures that they had in place prior to the summer. So if a school believes it is right to bring in, for example, the use of masks in communal areas, or wants to bring back in the bubble approach, etc., then schools have been given that autonomy to do that. And that was reinforced in the communications we sent to schools just before half term. Some local authorities have taken a rather more radical approach and have sort of kind of forced this issue, although the DfE have challenged them on that. We've given that autonomy to schools to make those decisions, but with the blessing of the Director of Public Health where that is needed. So a number of schools have brought back measures to address the high infection rates where they've got clearly in school transmission of infections. So that's an important point to make. The other update to give you is of course around the 12 to 15 vaccine programme. All of our mainstream schools now have had that in place. The only schools outstanding was the Harbour School, which is this week, and one of our independent schools, Mayfield School, which is also, I think, this week or next week. And that will complete the on-site vaccination programme in those schools. And I have to say, actually, I think it's been done superbly well by Solent NHS and their school immunisation team. And I know the secondary heads have fed back some really positive stuff in terms of the support they provided. In terms of uptake, we don't have any definitive figures to give you at this stage. I've got an estimate, which Claire Curry has given me, which is around about just under 50% take up, which I understand compared to the sort of national rates is pretty good. And of course, the government now has opened it up. So as well as the in-school vaccinations that were taking place, we've now opened it up so parents can book on-site clinics, which is going through St James's, and I understand that over half term there's a really good uptake there, so I should think those figures will improve when we get the next batch of figures in terms of uptake. So that has also taken place, and we've continued to provide support schools for that, and that pretty much brings us up to where we are at the moment. So yeah, happy to take any questions, Susie.
Thank you, Mike. Has anyone got any questions or comments that they want to make? Jeanette?
Yeah, just a quick question on the vaccinations. Do we have any figures for how many staff, teaching and non-teaching, have had their vaccinations?
Good question. I don't have that. I mean, I know that the vast majority will have had their vaccinations, but actual numbers, I don't know if we've got that figure. Actually, I can check with Alison Critchley. She would have been able to probably give you a better response if she were here. But I've not seen that figure, to be honest. So I'm not sure. I can check for you.
It's just that rumours are circulating that schools will be next on the mandatory vaccination stuff.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if we were in a position where we knew what that would be, but I can understand why we don't.
I don't think we know, but I can check. Yeah, but I don't think so, Jeanette.
Thanks.
Good question. That's it then. I don't think there's any other questions for you, Mike, or comments. I can't see anyone. Well, thanks for the report. This is going to become a historical document. It's very interesting how we've added to this report, because often you get reports separately, don't you? And it's a really interesting way of doing it, because when you look back, I was looking back at the earlier bits, and it was it seems in many ways like yesterday, and in many ways years ago.
Yeah, and I think we might do one or two more reports like this,
and then
I think we'll wrap it up at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, it has been quite an interesting historical account. I think Judith's got a hand up.
Yes, I can see. I can see now. Yeah, Judith.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested to know whether or not there's any element of blending of remote and in-school education, and whether lessons have been learned from the experience of educating quite a lot of children off-site, and indeed, more importantly and more practically, whether children who have to go to leave school because of having COVID and have to be off for 10 days or whatever it is, and children who may be sent home because a close friendship group has got it, or a class, are they getting home education?
Yeah, I mean, the schools now are in a much better position to respond to provision of remote education, and indeed, though, for those children that unfortunately are having to self-isolate, they are getting access to a much improved offer, and often access to the actual lessons that are taking place in school. It does vary from school to school depending on the situation, but many of our schools now are able to offer that. And of course, we're, as part of the PEP education strategy, we have a key priority around digital education, and we're looking to build on the successes of the last 18 months and to make sure that we continue to offer a really strong digital offer, both in the classroom and also at home. So yeah, well, I think we're in a really good position, Judith, compared to where we were.
Just a supplementary to that, what's happened to all the machines that we gave out, and how are they? There's still evidence that they're using them, and are they using them still in the class, and can they use them at home? And has there been many of them sold over the summer to pay for food, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we can track the ones that because it varies. So the initial allocation went through the local authority, and we've kept a track on those, and where they needed a maintenance or an upgrade, then we've been party to that. The second round of allocations went direct to schools, and as a local authority, we don't really have any knowledge and tracking of those. So I couldn't tell you what's happened to all of those. As I understand it, in terms of what the schools are telling us, they're still being used. And obviously, when children have to go to remote education, we've got all the devices in place to support that. We are certainly not, whereas once upon a time we were struggling for devices, that is not the case now. In fact, I would say we've probably got more than enough. Yeah. You're on mute.
You're on mute.
It would just be a bit of a pity if some of the good things about the remote education, including children being able to access remote materials, maybe even just to, on some occasions, mug up on what they learnt face to face and.
Yeah.
I think for. Oh, sorry, Mike. You can.
No, go on.
Parents, there are some places where involve the parents much more, and I can imagine that would be quite a nice thing, is to say, well, look what we did today, and call up the class again. Are there any schools that you know of that are really building on that as a success?
I would say that most of the schools that I visited so far, that initial stuff at home is actually being used as an essential part of their pedagogy now. All the schools I've visited have it's become part of business as usual, rather than. So it was essential to have it at home, but now it's either essential to have it in school or it's school to home. But I don't know whether anyone can give any more data on that, but that's definitely what I've seen anecdotally and heard anecdotally.
Yeah, I'm just say from a personal experience, I think there's some processes or some things that they've changed as to where it works. So for parents' evenings, for instance, a lot of those are remote now. So instead of a parent having to get to school, struggle to get there from work, not be able to park, they use an online system now. So, staff and parents can be in the comfort of their home whilst having that kind of feedback, and that seems to, I think that will carry on for lots of schools that I've spoken to.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. Mike, did you want to add anything else? Or?
Yeah, no, just to reinforce that. And of course, a number of our secondary schools, they've moved to make sure that every child has a device, and have agreed, putting agreements with the party suppliers to do that, and have those devices maintained, and asking parents have to pay for that unless they can be subsidised because it's a child who comes under pupil premium. But many secondary schools have gone down that route to support home learning as part of the overall offer that schools provide. So yeah, it's really moving forward.
Thank you. Thanks. I guess the other point that Judith was making, which I think is a really important one, is that did we come out of the pandemic taking the silver linings and not letting it kind of slip back? And I think it's fair to say that we did.
Definitely one. Yeah,
definitely. Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. So members of the Education Advisory Board have noted the actions that have been taken over the past 20 months by the Council and partners to respond to the pandemic and the ongoing work that's in place in order to continue to support education settings. Thank you, everyone. That is noted by the board. And the last report is item 6, which is the strategy to reduce fixed term exclusions and improve school attendance. And Mike, are you presenting this as well?
I'll present this and just go through briefly through the report. I won't go through the strategy in detail, otherwise we're going to be here forever. So I'll just do a brief summary and then happy to take questions. So yeah, just to say the purpose of this report is to give you sight of a draft citywide multi-agency strategy which we've been working on for the past few months and which went to the PEP Strategic Board a few weeks ago. And what we're doing here is effectively putting forward a case, I suppose, and a proposed way forward for a renewed collective effort on how we can reduce time lost from school through non-attendance, exclusions, reduced timetables, etc., against the background of learning loss that obviously has been experienced by many of our children and young people during the course of the pandemic. And the rationale for why we're doing this is because it's still, we know, a huge issue for us. Although we don't have a sort of comparable data to benchmark ourselves against national figures since 2018-19 in terms of reliable data, we do know that school attendance and fixed term exclusions are, when I say fixed term exclusions, it's now been replaced by the term suspensions. So forgive me if I don't use the new terminology, but school attendance and suspension still remains a big issue for us. And in the strategy, we've set out some of the data from 2018-19. We have also included data from 1920, which does actually show a significant improvement, and that does give some comparisons for national averages in terms of exclusions. We can't give any data around attendance. That isn't available, but exclusions we do have some data, and as I say, that does show improvements. But the caveat there is, treat that with extreme caution because of what happened over the pandemic, and I think the proof of the pudding will be in terms of what happens this year. But based on reliable data where we can make those comparisons, then we remain really concerned. So what this strategy does, it pulls together a lot of the work we've been doing over the last few years and also the work we've done during the course of the pandemic. We're not going to throw away a lot of that work. There's some good work in there. Some of that work has had traction, and it's important that we continue with that and build on that. But we obviously need to do more. And a major strand of this piece of work is something what we're calling relational practice, which builds on all the work we're doing around restorative practice, which is around high challenge and high support for our children and families. And we've been working closely with Salton's Academy Trust, as we have a really good standout example in Trafalgar School that have been implementing this approach over the last 3 or 4 years, based on good practice elsewhere in the country, particularly in Leeds, and they've been working with a particular school in Leeds who have been doing this, but we also know of some good work that's been going on in Hull also. And what they've been able to do is a sort of clear measurable impact of that is to reduce exclusions, and they have hardly any exclusions now at Trafalgar because of the approach they've taken with regard to relational practice. It's not just about the relationships with children and families, it's also about other things. It's not a silver bullet. So for example, they've put a lot of work in terms of their in-house alternative provision, which provides bespoke education for those children that are struggling. But what they don't do, and unfortunately this is what happens in other schools, is that provision becomes a bit of a silo area for children who are struggling, and they stay within that kind of alternative provision, whereas at Trafalgar they provide that bespoke provision. It's tailored, but they're quickly moved back into mainstream classes to benefit from that, and that has paid real dividends at Trafalgar. So it's not just around relational practice, it's more than that, but we're looking to build on that. And over the course of the next year and beyond, we're going to implement this with waves of schools. So our first wave of schools will involve 17 schools, as well as also the one FE college, and they will be getting the benefit of training from Saltons Academy Trust, and also a company called L30, which is somebody called Mark Finneth, who has been to our PEP conference and our inclusion conference, and they'll be providing training and support over the course of this year to help them roll out relational practice in our schools. And to do that, we'll need the commitment from the head teacher and obviously the senior leadership team, including obviously the governing board and the Multi-Academy Trust, where that's relevant. We'll have the support of the local authority through the partnership that we're developing with Saltons Academy Trust, and then also the support from L30, which is Mark Finneth. So we're really excited about this approach. We believe it will deliver better outcomes. We've seen fantastic success in cities like Hull and Leeds. So yeah, I think probably I'll stop there and invite any questions.
Thank you, Mike. I have spotted it. Let me just look at the time. Who was first? Judith. Because you no. Terry. No, Judith. I can't work out what time it was.
Just to be quick about it, yeah. I was interested in the relationship between a restorative practice and a relational practice, and maybe it would be worth having a half hour devoted to your relational practice, and with a particular attention to how it might overlap. And I hope that families wouldn't be subjected to two very, very slightly different sorts of practice, because some of the same families will be getting both. But I don't particularly want to take time in this meeting now, but I do think it might be useful to have a little presentation, maybe not just for us, but for training for counsellors on it. I did find the one that was done on restorative practice, although I knew a bit about it anyway, very, very helpful. And it'd be good to have that. I think it's an exciting, if it's like restorative practice, it sounds like it's a very exciting thing to do.
Yeah, no, we've had a similar sort of question from members of the PEP Strategic Board, actually, who were just wanting to understand that difference. I mean, Sarah might want to come in, but essentially the restorative practice we've been running and doing quite a lot of training in schools has kind of focused on more individual pupils and families and the work of the pastoral teams, whereas this is very much a whole school approach which affects all pupils. It's a culture we're looking to establish within schools, not just focusing on those that are the most vulnerable. But Sarah might want to just come in and add a bit more to that.
Happy to, if that's okay, Chair.
Absolutely.
So it incorporates the two in a way. Relational practices restorative practices are relational approaches, and it also includes some of the work we're doing on a whole range of other things, including trauma-informed approaches and so on. So it is absolutely, as Mike said, it's a way of being. It's not an intervention. So where some people might have, following some kind of breakdown in relationship, a restorative justice, a restorative meeting, actually relational approaches is the whole the way of being, the way you teach your classroom management, your leadership style, in that whole high challenge, high support, which goes alongside restorative approaches. But Mike's point about it should be really good to have a presentation, a short session that explains a little bit about what that is about to yourselves and to the strategic board. But it's not an intervention. It's certainly not something that we do to families. Families hopefully wouldn't notice, but what they might do is that they might actually feel that they've been listened to, that they've been heard, that they're part of a solution, and that it's kind of quite a solution focused way. It's not a soft option, it's the high challenge, high support, but within building the foundations of a strong relationship, so that when you do need to challenge, you've got that capital in the bank, as it were.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sarah. That's good. And I apologise, Terry. I was looking at my times and I realised that I put Judith ahead of you. So, Terry.
No, that's absolutely fine. I guess my question is on restorative as well, and just are we funding it properly. So, and can we get some guarantees that restorative isn't going to lead to, schools preventing schools from being able to permanently exclude those who really, cannot remain within that setting. I think for some children, schools or a certain school just isn't for them. I would hate to think that schools are, being restoratives being pushed onto schools as a measure of, keep it in house when actually they've exhausted all options. So are we funding the restorative programme properly? And does it go hand in hand with those who really do need to move on, certain individuals?
Okay. Well, in terms of the funding, so we've got some funding in place already and some short-term funding which is supporting this. We are going to be taking a paper to Schools Forum at some point in the next few months to ask for some additional support from the DSG Carrier Board, which could be contentious, but I think we can make a strong case for why we need to support this. So there will be some additional funding we'll be seeking to really roll this out citywide. In terms of schools and the ability to use exclusions. So on permanent exclusions, it's worth just noting that we are we have a very low rate of permanent exclusions in Portsmouth. And the last time we were able to make those comparisons, we are one of the lowest in the country. And that's as a result of the protocols we established a number of years ago, where we were the highest in the country on permanent exclusions. We're now in the bottom 10%, top 10%, you know what I mean? We're doing exceptionally well, and that's because of those protocols we put in place. For fixed term exclusions, we're still relatively high, particularly in secondary. Obviously, there is I'm not saying there isn't a case for a fixed term exclusion, and certainly for some of those pupils where they get, one exclusion, it can work. But where we're seeing multiple exclusions, what we are seeing is it's for the children, they absolutely are not working. The outcomes are really poor. Might help the teacher in terms of how they're managing the class, but in terms of the outcomes for those pupils, they are really poor, and that's the issue we have. And we've seen how this relational practice approach has been developed in other schools where they've brought exclusions down. Teachers still feel supported, and they've been given the tools to be able to deliver this, and that's what we want to see come down. We're not forcing it on schools. We're not saying you can't do X, Y, and Z, but we are saying here is an approach which we think will help you bring down exclusions and support your teachers.
So, and that's great news, I think, about the exclusions, but that's not because we're making it more difficult for schools to exclude.
No, it's at the end of the day, it's a choice for schools. We can't force, but we will be strongly challenging schools where we've got high rates of fixed term exclusions. And it doesn't matter whether you're in academy or LA maintained schools. There'll be a lot of challenge where we see those kind of figures increase or spike. Yeah.
I'm getting the feeling that Sarah wanted to jump in on this particular issue. Is that right? Is that okay, Jeanette?
Yeah, it's just to add something to that, if that's okay. In terms of the question about are we forcing this on people, one of the things about restorative and relational approaches is you can't force people to work in that way. They have to buy into it. You have to. It is a culture and an ethos. And one of the reasons why quite a lot of exclusions happen is because teachers feel that is the only way that they can be supported, that they kind of feel I can't have this child in my classroom because of the impact it has on them and their sense of ownership of an authority in the classroom. And actually relational approaches done well changes that whole way, so that the teacher absolutely feels and is genuinely supported in a different way. And it's about getting an outcome for the child and building that relationship, so that when they come back, you're not dreading them coming back into the classroom, that actually you're pleased to see them and they're there to learn. But it's a culture and an ethos that can't be forced. So if schools for whatever reason don't buy into it, then we can't force them to do that, but we will try and convince them of the merits of this and the evidence behind it.
Thank you, Sarah. Jeanette. Oh, Terry, did you want to come back on that? No, Jeanette?
Yeah, thank you. Just to comment on that sort of discussion, I've always felt exclusions, fixed or not, should be the last resort, not the first. And there's been great inroads in that, because we were many years ago doing it first rather than sort of thinking. So any implementing of any processes that help schools would be good. My question was on chronic absence. And it's a question really, if somebody's off for disability or health reasons, are they included in those figures? Because I'm also having an eye on long COVID.
Yeah, they are included in those figures. Yeah, they are.
So
anybody with chronic absence, and when we refer to chronic absence, we're kind of referring to children with 50% below absence. They ought to have. Well, first there should be a plan of some kind in place, at the very minimum, an early help assessment, or what we're going to be calling a family support plan going forward, and there should be a lead professional as well. Although we know from our figures that many of those children don't have lead professionals in place. So that would all be in place. But yes, in terms of those figures, it will include some of those children that you've just mentioned, Jeanette.
Jeanette, just so you know, because you know that this is something that that I've been really strongly watching, particularly on the long COVID stuff. I just had a conversation this morning with Mike and Sally and everything, and I said we have to manage this in. Sometimes the systems are there and it's how we manage things within the systems. And actually, I want any family who have a child who's got long COVID to feel that they're understood and cared for. We need to manage, we need to put our inclusion principles in practice, even if the mechanism by which we're alerted to their absence is a bit of a blunt tool. So,
but if we don't have lead professionals for that, that's going to be difficult. And hearing that we don't, some children do not have, or families do not have a lead professional, is difficult because of the shortage of lead professionals, but also how we're going to plug that gap, basically.
Okay. Without hijacking this entire meeting, and I'm happy to have a conversation offline, the long COVID working group, we've made some real progress with the CCG and looking at health, the people who make the decisions about whether someone's got long COVID or not, and the places that people go to try and find out if they can get support for that. We've made inroads with. It's not perfect yet, but my interest is particularly with children with long COVID. But there's a really good working group on that. I'm really happy to chat with you about it. If you want to know more.
And I'm on the working group, but I haven't been to a couple of meetings. So I'll look
Last
back
one was really good.
and have that conversation with you, Susie. Thank you.
Fantastic. Terry.
Yeah, thank you. It's sort of moved forward a little bit, so I can come back if I may. Moving probably away from restorative and into the exclusion part of that. So again, where that's very much the end of the line, I'm hearing that Harbour, for instance, has a waiting list of up to a year. So is there anything in place to address situations where an individual really that school have exasperated themselves, they've exhausted every single option, and they're just waiting to get someone in? Is there anything in line for that changing fairly soon?
Well, we've got a little bit of waiting list to Key Stage 3 at the Harbour School, which we're managing, and we believe that will improve next year once we've got the Wimmering provision in place. In the meantime, for those small numbers where they are waiting, we do have other support in place. So, for example, the Inclusion Outreach Service being a really good example of that, where we can provide additional support to schools, which is free, to help them manage and support those children that are on that waiting list. Sarah might want to come in with a few other areas, and obviously we've been providing support through the Portsmouth Inclusion Education Quality Mark, which also gives support to schools through that as a result of the self-assessment they do, which will then identify areas where we can provide additional support. But the Inclusion Outreach Service is a really key part of that, Terry.
Great. So no child is left in a school where it's clearly not working pending entry into Harbour?
Well, so long as the school reaches out to us, yeah. I mean, we would always support those schools, and the Inclusion Outreach Service is the area that we would point schools to if they need that additional support. Absolutely, yeah.
Great.
Sarah, do you want to add something to that?
Well, so they may be in the school in an interim period while they're waiting allocation, but that's where as Mike says, we'd work with the Inclusion Outreach Service to put support in place. And if it's a dual registered place and the school would be paying for that dual registered place, then actually it's looking, well, what else can we do to be creative about how that resource can be used to make sure that the child's needs are met and the school is able to get the support that they need. We are also working, because one of the things about Harbour, where they are dual registered places, those actually schools need to take them back as well. In order to free up those spaces, it needs to be a revolving door, because we could make the school 4 times the size and you'd fill it, because that's the very nature of these things. But actually the discussions with heads is we don't need to do that. It's about managing. We have got the space. It's about managing the tension within that, and the tension on inclusion. So we're also working to evaluate all the in the school's own alternative provisions and looking at sharing best practice across there, because actually schools have all got their own things that they do as well, and learning from each other on that. So we are looking with the Harbour about their reviews and their review processes, so that when a child may be ready to return to mainstream and therefore free up a place for someone else, then obviously that's a great way forward, and great for those children to be able to get back into mainstream as a success.
Yeah, and I think the work they do at Harbour is often seeing it firsthand. It is brilliant, and they do really equip children for mainstream and going back to mainstream. So it was just more a case of that waiting list or that year that I'd heard of, but it seems like it's in hand. Just very quickly as well, can somebody explain that? Is it the Fairer Schools Placement Programme? Is that right? Am I right in thinking?
It's called the Fair Access Protocol. Yeah. So where you've got children in that sort of position, it will go through a fair access protocol. So for secondary schools, we have a group which is led by Secretary Lead Links, and they will come to a decision about where those children are placed. And for primary, we have fair access protocol in place, where we've got a number of inclusion support panels based on a geographical basis. But yeah, FAP is what it's called for short. Yeah.
And it's regulated so that there aren't schools that are sending hundreds of kids off and others that are being quite resilient. It's fair and it's...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
great.
Yeah, very fair. Although there's quite a bit of tension, but actually it's a well-respected process across the city. We manage it and facilitate it on behalf of schools, but it's schools effectively making the decisions as part of those panels. Yeah.
And one more for me, sorry to keep going on, but one more for me if it's okay, it's in my notes, and it was about Trafalgar and the work that they do there, and their provision of inclusion provision sounds fantastic, and but obviously they've had funding to do that. What are we doing in terms of, if we're going to share that model, what are we doing in terms of funding schools so they can set up that kind of provision to reduce exclusions and what have you? So it's not extra money.
Just say actually Trafalgar have not had any additional funding for this, so they've done that completely within their own budget, and have adapted their curriculum and their approach to relational practice accordingly. So we'd want every school to do that. We are providing some funding which we are giving to Salters Academy Trust to lead on this work across the city, so all schools can benefit from this, but there is no additional funding going to Trafalgar for their own work per se.
Okay, so schools won't get a grant or something to change facilities, employ specialists?
No, what they will get is training support, bespoke support through Salters Academy Trust and through Mark Finnis. So they will get that as part of this programme of support, but we'd obviously expect schools to embed this and deliver this as part of their their normal way of operating.
Brilliant. And then last but not least, if that's okay, to come back on Jeanette's point, is there any way that we can have an update in the next meeting around the named lead professional figures, and so we can track that and see where that's going? Because 50% seems really high, or less than 50%.
Yeah, no, happy to do that, and obviously we track and monitor that through our LA Link coordinators that are attached to all our schools, and we are really watching the chronic absence with a lot of interest, and those figures around children who don't perhaps have a plan in place, like an early help assessment or indeed a lead professional. Yeah, we want to crack that, and as part of our ambitious targets is effectively to say that any child who has chronic absence should have a plan in place and have a lead professional. 100%. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've got to the end of everyone's questions and comments, and it was a really interesting report and a really interesting discussion. I know that I get to speak about this a lot with people, so I try and keep quiet and let other people ask the questions and everything. But I do want to make a couple of comments just to pull it together. For me, I think this is a really exciting opportunity because it actually pulls together some of the strands that have been there around inclusion and also the restorative work that's been going on. And the way I see it is the whole relational philosophy is really important, because what we want is kids to be in school, and when they're in school and they want to be in school, then they learn. And so we often get challenged, don't we, on this thing about standards, but actually children are only going to learn if they're in school and they want to be in school. And I have to confess that I have been that teacher. I mean, Terry and I have both got the teaching experience, and a couple of other people in this room have, where, you know, someone's not coming in and you've got to be honest with yourself and you breathe a sigh of relief. And I suppose it's about unpicking that. It's not that you don't want that child in there, you don't want that behaviour in there. And actually, what can we do with our inclusive philosophy and our practice to support the school and the family and ultimately the child, and so that the behaviours aren't there. And I genuinely think, when I look at the stuff that's happened at Trafalgar, is that when a school buys into this, we've already seen case studies where this can be really transformational. And I'm really optimistic about the next couple of years about how if schools do buy into it, I think we could see a real step change in some of the stuff that we've been focusing on trying to improve. So thank you to everyone who's been involved in this, and thanks for the questions and the challenge as well. And we'll look forward to seeing how this rolls out. So I think I can safely say that the members recommend this strategy, citywide multi-agency strategy to improve school attendance and reduce exclusions. And just to note that the final version of the strategy and an update on the implementation of the action plan will be brought to the next board meeting in February 2022. Okay, thank you very much for those 3 reports to all officers, and thank you to members for raising the questions. The date of the next meeting is Thursday, the 10th of February at 4 o'clock. And we will confirm the location nearer the date, whether it will be online again or whether we'll be meeting in person. Are there any final comments or questions?
Yeah, just one from me, Susie, which is it has been a really difficult time, and we said this at the last meeting, but to thank every member of staff in schools, including governors and non-teaching staff, and all the officers within the local authority, because I think they've worked so tirelessly over the months, and it shows. And you know, the standard of the reports and everything else has been really good. So just a personal thanks from me.
Thanks so much, Jeanette.
Exactly the same. So perhaps you could make it from us all, because I was definitely about to say exactly the same. I think.
I think Judith's frozen.
We're not through the COVID either, but it's had. I hope that people with abilities to be flexible and things like that, and I feel it's perhaps strengthened people rather than the other way around.
Yeah, thank you, Judith. And I can see Terry nodding, so I'm assuming this is a joint thank you from all of us to all officers and teachers and everyone working in schools. That nice note to finish on. Thank you, everybody, and I'll see you at some point, sometime, somewhere. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Turn the live stream off. You'll still be audible for a couple of minutes.
I'll hang around, but other people can leave.